Hello and welcome to Tithely Backstage, where we talk through all things churches and product. My name is Kasey, one of your hosts. We also have John Holtkamp, our group PM of Tithely, and our product department lead, Dan Irmler, joining us. So we're so excited for this episode. We're going to be diving into a really cool topic, but we start every episode with a question off the top. And it does have to do with the topic as well. So our question off the top today, I'm going to throw it to you first, John, is explain to us maybe your best experience when it comes to online church, viewing, watching, whatever that might be.
Yeah, so for us, we have kids at home. Not as many kids as Dan has, but we have kids at home. And as
Wait,
anybody who has kids
hold up,
knows,
hold up. Let's I do have a lot of kids because I know there's a lot of viewers who are now like, what does Dan run like a like a hotel for kids? I have 6 children. We were planning on having 4, and then we got a surprise, and we got another surprise because we had twins. So I have 6 kids, which is a whole lot of kids. Okay, John,
so
sorry to cut you off there, but there's a lot.
I only have 2.
Same.
But still,
just two.
two brings plenty of opportunities for sickness. And we were at home once and watching at home. There were baptisms at church, and we saw one of our best friends' families. I said that horribly. You get the idea. Families that are our best friends. They were baptizing their kids on screen, and our kids were so excited and yelling at the screen at the people baptizing. And like it was a moment where like I was tearing up because it was so beautiful. And this was like we wouldn't have even seen it. We wouldn't even known it happened probably if we hadn't had that. So while obviously better in person, we were taking pictures of the screen, texting the families. So as soon as they got off stage, they'd see that and see us celebrating. We even recorded a video of our kids jumping up and down, yelling the kid's name that was baptized. So I mean, how amazing is that like we can have these moments in modern times where I'm stuck at home, my kids are sick, we are being nice enough not to go throw that at people in the nursery, but we can still enjoy this and see this, and our kids can see it. So huge win.
That's so good.
Man,
And
I
Dan,
have.
to you now, best experience when it comes to online church.
I mean,
Maybe it is just with your 6 kids, just getting them out of bed and
yeah.
going to the living room is a win in of itself.
I'll be honest. I am like I'm a hardcore, like I grew up in like fundamental Christianity, which right, there's a lot of like, there's been a lot of therapy since then. But I'm just like an in-person kind of guy. So I think I've maybe watched, like I'll listen to sermons online, but to like tune in and be there maybe a couple nights during COVID, right? We all had to, and I think it was actually very difficult to get my kids. So what we would do was we put The Chosen on in another room, and like our kids would get into that, or like a Bible, and then me and my wife would jump in online, and we did Zoom, and so you could kind of see everybody else. So it's a great time to be able to like spy on everybody else because you kind of have the Zoom, and you just kind of go and see what everyone else is doing, which is awesome. If you're a people watcher and your church live stream through Zoom, it was a good experience. So John, you had like a really cool moment. I again, I don't think I've attended in quite a few. I mean, during COVID, it was through Zoom, right? And so it was good. I think, yeah, it was through Zoom. So I don't have this like amazing experience. So John, thank you for like bringing it in today because I didn't know where to go with this question. Like like for me, like whenever you're doing like true online church, like your church can't meet in person, it's like the sound worked. Right? The transitions worked, the cameras were on, and you were able to get through like some semblance of the service, and like that was a win. But it's really difficult to like do a true online service. We were a small church, so we were just doing the best that we could.
So I already want to hop in here, like, because this is going to be a great episode because you got Dan on that side of things, and I actually, like, spoilers for where we talk about. I'm actually the person that leads the live stream team, so you're going to have some. I'm just going to tell you right here before anybody even gets in here, we're going to have some
Oh, it's gonna
interesting
get hot,
perspectives
guys.
on this
It's
one.
going to be like
Yeah,
Rock'em Sock'em Robots. It's going to
yeah,
be
I'm going to
great.
get fired, so just enjoy the live
So
firing.
good, so good. It's like, oh man, keep watching, people.
So good.
So
Yeah, because this is an interesting one. Because I love being in person at church, of course, as we all do. But I also, during the season of restrictions and COVID and all that, I've got 2 young kids at home as well. And I have to say that first Sunday with a fresh plate of bacon, a nice cup of coffee, sitting on my couch, It wasn't too bad. Although I will say I have a hard time engaging in worship in like a living room setting. Like, all right, stand where you are. I think I'll sit on my comfy couch. That's great. But yeah, lots of fun doing that. But again, I agree with Dan as well that I love the idea of like being together in person. But that's the topic they're going to be diving into and kind of getting multiple perspectives, which I'm really excited for.
Mm.
Is just this concept of live streaming or online church. What does that look like? What are some of the elements around it? So to kind of jump on in, our first question here is focusing on the advantages. So maybe let's start with you, John. What are some of the biggest advantages of online church? Maybe it could be bigger outreach, a good entry point for new people, a neighbor to kind of, that's a good first step for them, vacation. Anyways, I'm answering my own question, but what are some of the biggest advantages from your opinion of online church?
Man, there are some great reasons for it. And I mean, I already mentioned one, kids. Kids, 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 kids. Holy schmoly. And also, we had COVID, so there was obviously a great reason for everyone to get an online church because basically everyone had no choice. But in the modern era now, I'm going to just say it post COVID, we're able to meet in church again. And at that point, really, it's just sickness and family and travel. But honestly, for me, and this is going to go from person to person because you can lean way on the other side, as what we're going to talk about now as Dan and I duke it out throughout this episode. But there's a positive side. We're on the way to church, which my church is actually like 35 minutes away. I actually listened to another sermon on the way to church. So if you're a disciplined person who's really into like learning, right? Like you are passionate about this, as we all should be. And that wasn't meant to be aimed at you, Dan, but it sure felt like it. So I like that. As you should be, Dan.
Like,
Yeah. Like it gives you the opportunity to listen to more churches. So I have a church in Columbus that I just love. Okay. Oh my goodness, do I love them. I listen to them on the way to church in the morning, and then I'm at church because you know what? I'm serving. I serve every Sunday. I don't get to pay much attention at my own church, but that gives me a Sunday morning experience on the way to church. And then when I'm at church, I can actually do the serving that I'm going to do, and then listen to my service at my church at a later time. So I get my Sunday in the car, which honestly, silence and solitude with service, it isn't all that bad, though we really want community. And I get my community at church, even though I don't actually get the service of like hearing the sermon. So there you go, Dan. There's a nice loophole for you.
That's good. Can you keep a little score chart, Casey? Like one
for
John.
Point John.
There we go. We'll
Yeah.
see We'll see how it comes out at the end. So I want to make a ton of caveats, okay? Because I am not anti-live streaming. I do think we were commissioned by Christ to go and share the gospel, go and make disciples. And I think live streaming and being online is a tool we can use to go and get out the gospel, right? So I want to make another caveat. I am pro live streaming for people who have no other way to be at church, right? I do think it's a way for them to be as a part of the service as possible, right? And I'm pro technology. It's funny enough, I actually created a course. This is back when it was like actually difficult. Like churches were like, we need to do live streaming, and $200,000 later, like we have our setup. And so I actually made a course for churches on how to get set up with live streaming. So I'm actually pro on the technology. Now, I think during COVID, and I think if you sat with any church, there's something happened. We created a new behavior in a lot of our churches that maybe it was okay not to go to church. I think before COVID, we weren't batting super well. I think if I would have to go back to Barnum, I think it was somewhere around the average church member attends maybe 2 times a month. And I think that lowered to about 1 time a month. And I can pull up those numbers, and maybe I might be a little bit off, but I think it's typical. So coming out of COVID, something happened, right? People are not attending the church. I think we all know this kind of instinctually. Did I say that right? I think we all know that on that level because we kind of look around and we're like, man, those people who attended before aren't attending. So when it comes to my thought or on live streaming, yes, I think it's a wonderful tool churches should use, but we should always, 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 always err to in person. Okay, what are the advantages? I think it's just keeping people connected. I think that's a huge advantage, and I think it could be an outreach opportunity. That's what I'd love to see, right? Someone scrolling through Facebook, doesn't attend church, maybe attended church as a kid, man, sees a worship service, sees a pastor preaching, and sits there for the service, and then like, man, this church is right next to me. I think there's a wonderful outreach opportunity, and I think for people who have no other way to be a part of the services, it's a wonderful thing there, and for John Holtkamp to listen to sermons on the way to church. So There we go.
Yeah. No, I think there's lots of advantages. Of course, when it comes to online church, live streaming. At my local church, this is something before working for Tithely, I did working for a church is the connections piece of it, like getting connected, multiple, like what first step, multiple steps in discipleship, programs, small groups, and all that. And at our local church now, my family and I just recently moved and got plugged in serving is again with connections. And that is a story we hear time and time again when it comes to online church is that it's a first step. It's, hey, my neighbor goes to your church. We tuned in online for a few weeks, and now we're coming in person. And then we give them a little branded coffee mug because, classic, you can't come to church and not get a coffee mug. So I love it for that purpose as well. It's a great first step for people who maybe haven't been to church ever or for a long time. And it's just a great entry point to kind of get into that rhythm of Sunday mornings. In addition to, like you guys have already mentioned, but sickness, travel, complexities of kids, or like when we had our second son was born, we weren't at church the very next Sunday. We have a newborn baby, so we're able to still participate in church through online streaming. So yeah, there's definitely lots of advantages from all that. And so maybe now let's move into Dan's just queuing up and getting ready, I'm sure. Some of the potential perceived disadvantages to online church. Yeah, so Dan, let me throw it to you now. When it comes to online church, I know you kind of touched on a few elements on a surface level, but let's dive deep into maybe would be some of the perceptions of some of the drawbacks when it comes to online church or live streaming.
And I want to be really careful here because I know these can lean into some strawman arguments, but we know, right, we want that so church, ecclesia, it's a called out assembly, right? It's people assembling together. That is the definition of church, okay? Just as Christians, that's how we think about church. And so when you change the definition to viewers online, that is not the same. It just isn't. And I think as a church, we need to be very specific and saying, hey, we need to come together where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst, right? So we really want to just think about this. Let's get believers together. There is something about spending time with other believers in worship, in studying the word, in fellowship, that there's nothing else like it around the world. And really, as you begin to go around the world, right, you see believers. Now, their services may look a little bit different, but man, when you see that happening in Mexico, in India, it is a beautiful thing to think these people who don't speak the same language, who don't have the same traditions, who don't have the same backgrounds are doing what I do. It's a beautiful thing that, right, we see it in Acts, and as Christians, we want to model that. We want to be together. We want to have those times together. So as far as disadvantages, you just can't. You cannot have the same life on life, right, experience. Now, again, I get it. There's these, let's move out all of the other examples from sickness or travel. But if you are a healthy individual, right, who maybe can go to work on the week, right, I believe that you should try to be in church on the weekend, okay? And I may be speaking past, right. Churches may be hearing me and be like, Dan, we agree. And so maybe I'm speaking past the church and more speaking to the church member at this point. But I think we want to really encourage people to be part of that local body. Now, I'm a little bit different, right? I'm that guy who goes Sunday morning, right? Sunday school, Sunday evening, Wednesday night. I do a lot of church. I take my family to church a lot. It wasn't always like that. I used to go to a church where we basically had Sunday morning, right, one service, and then we'd meet up as a small group. That's fine too. But I'm definitely, as I'm getting older, I want to be around other believers, especially as this world gets a little bit darker, gets a little bit worse. As just a purely preferential thing, when you're in church, you're there, right? You can focus. You're with. When you're online or you're on a screen, I mean, have you ever tried doing your devotions on your Bible? It's difficult. I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm just saying you're going to have to fight some distractions, right? You're going to have to fight the YouTube tab or the notifications. And when you're watching church online, you're going to have to fight some of the distractions. When you're there, it's a little bit easier to focus. So I definitely think there's some advantages to being in person, but I think it's more of a mandate, right? If you are able-bodied and you can do that, I think you should do that. And I think churches should encourage people. I think it is, if I remember correctly, it's Hebrews 10 that, in these latter days, let's make sure we come together so much the more as we see the day approaching, right? Let's gather, let's assemble, let's not do it less. And I just look at the world and what Christians are facing today, and I don't think it's a time for us to be scattered. I don't think it's a time for us to be disconnected from the local body. We need to be more connected. So that's kind of my general stance. I know it's not pick up a chair and toss it, or and I get there's real reasons why. Again, I think churches should have live streaming, right? But I think who that live streaming is for is a very specific person, right? We're doing outreach or trying to connect to a person who would be unable to attend in person. I don't think it's for the majority of the church.
Yeah, and John, I'd love to give you some space here as well. Just any thoughts you might have around some of the potential drawbacks when it comes to online church, live streaming, etc.
Yeah. So, I mean, I honestly, most of what Dan has said, I'd say everything Dan has said, I actually agree with completely. There's a number of families, my church went through a hard time, I'd say like 4 years ago. And we had a number of people end up walking out of the church as we went through. It wasn't really a church split. It was just problems where a lot of people ended up leaving. And, one of the families closest to us will say, "Oh yeah, we're watching church online," and it's not my place to judge one way or the other whether they're there or not. But I do know what we had because they were there. And I don't mean this isn't selfishly what we had, like me and my wife, but it's like what like as families together growing in God together, I know what we had, and it's not there anymore. And I know they don't have that anymore because they're watching online. And it's really exactly what Dan's talking about. As we're able to be there together and growing together, it's so much more. I mean, even in growth, like two horses running together, being able to make themselves go faster, and like the analogy that can be used anywhere. I think it's the same way here, where it's so important that we're together. However, as I started the episode saying, I lead the live stream team at that very church because I think the benefits do outweigh the problems. And I think, Dan, you said it perfectly, of it's on churches to make sure people know this, right? Like, one, their motivations need to be right. Like, we're not trying to get man, if we could just get that number up to 2,000 online when we have a church of 50, it's like, so something feels a little off here, right? Yeah. But
that's such a good point. Sorry, John, I just want to have maybe we can conversation, because you did see that. You saw these pastors, and this was tough, and you're seeing these guys like, man, how did your attendance go during COVID? We blew up. We had 10,000 people go to our service, and I'm like, are you looking at the Facebook algorithm that basically someone swiped past, so you're seeing impressions, right? Is that what's going on here? And so let me ask you this: when you get with your live streaming crew, because it is a ministry, right? These people are putting in time and energy. What is the why? Like, what is your big, hey guys, we're doing this, we're serving the Lord. Here is why we're doing it. What is typically what you tell these guys?
I mean, I think what you bring up is a great point. And to be perfectly honest, the position I've been in of leading this team has been very short. However, I have served on this team for a long time. So I think even establishing the why myself is honestly a journey I'm still on right now, which is why I don't have a great answer for you even now. And I think it's something that we really need to establish within the team. But I mean, the goal here is to help those who can't make it to church be able to experience church. And I will say that
that's understood on the team.
Well, I honestly can't say if it's or not. That's why I'm saying I need to establish that why. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, I think that is.
I know it's new, but I was fascinated. Yeah. Man, if you've been leading this team for a year, man, I'd love to get your insight. Again, I'm learning a lot too. So.
Yeah, but I mean, for me personally, and I mean that's obviously what's going to permeate through the team. It's that, but what about the person in California? You could make they can't be at church. No, honestly, I would rather them be at a church in California versus a church in Cincinnati. And that's where my heart is. But I would say that's not for me on the live stream team. I want to create the best service possible for the person that can't make it and needs to be able to engage with God, not engage with the fact that the live stream is not going very well. My goal is not to, I would even argue, so Dan, good. It's not my job to determine who the target audience is. That's the pastor's job. And it's also the pastor's job to be saying, hey, if you're in the Cincinnati area, by the way, that's where I am. If you're in the Cincinnati area, please come join us in person because we would love to have you here.
Mm.
If you're not in the Cincinnati area or you're in the Cincinnati area and you can't make it, so be it. We're so glad you're watching with us. And it's not, there's no judgment there. Like, it's up to God then to work in them. But I think,
John, I love that you say that. I love that you put the emphasis on as a live stream ministry, because you can't hear me and be like, Dan doesn't like live stream teams. No, don't, please don't take that away. Like, I'm out to, throw away your ATEM switches and cameras and they just all be out. Because your responsibility is to provide an excellent, live streaming experience of people who are viewing can see Christ and draw close to him, right? That is the goal that you're on. I guess I'm kind of addressing, senior leadership who's making the decisions. Like, how do they see their live stream ministry? Do they see it as a way to connect? And I think most pastors, there's very few guys who are like, I shut down the local and I'm just going, right, I'm going to be tuning in. I think most pastors, at least 99 that I've met, 99% of the ones I've met, want people to come and fellowship with other believers locally. And so, but I love that you made that distinction, that it's not up to your team to judge the hearts. Like, this person isn't logging on with the right heart. They're getting booted from the live stream.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I have know of some churches, like great friends as well, but just that mindset that maybe I think you even touched on a little bit, Dan, as well as you, John, of especially during the season of COVID or even coming out of it. And it's just like, check out the reach of our online. We got people in the UK and all across the North America and the world, like tuning in to our live service. And not that you would ever turn people away, and you're excited for people hearing the gospel. I think you made that point a little bit ago, Dan, is like, this is a tool to like get the gospel out to people. That's great. But with the ultimate goal, I've always appreciated the language when it comes to online church or live streaming, of encouraging people to then take that next step and join in person. So even churches that some have like a different feed, that it's like a separate feed that's speaking to the online viewer, or if it's not, then like the person kind of hosting on stage, like, hey, and if you're joining us online, thank you, we're excited you're here. If you're able, we'd love to invite you to join us in person next week, just to kind of establish that value of that this online church live streaming is, it's a great resource, as we talked about, kids, sickness, travel. But the ultimate goal is in-person gathering, doing church in community together. Transitioning a bit, John, to, like you're saying, this is part of what you do at your local church, is the live stream. Would love to throw this to you first, but what are some of the strategies that you've seen when it comes to churches doing online church, doing live stream, maybe even some of the good, the bad, the ugly, some of the different ways, and kind of some of the sub elements that you've seen churches do? What's kind of stood out? Again, both kind of some great examples and maybe some not good examples.
Yeah. So we talked about this last episode, us being in product, and it's easy to sometimes think everyone thinks like we do, or everyone's reading the books we are, but we are that this is what we do. And I feel we do see the world slightly differently. That is not better or worse. We just see it slightly differently. And so, like, I will nitpick things. I will annoy my poor wife to death, and that's something I've learned to control. I think, Dan, you're probably in the same boat there. Probably you too, Kasey. We see the problems and we want to fix them. But something great about what I get to do with the live stream team is, like, I've been able to experience live streams from across the board, from watching like the biggest churches, which most of us have seen, like clips from Facebook or whatever, but even going in and watching those services, down to seeing what a smaller church does, understanding what our church does. And I think a big, like, we want to talk about the ugly, the quality issue, which, Dan, you touched on this really early on. Our church, and like, we're just happy if the thing turns on. Who cares if the shot's even pointing at the pastor? As long as the audio's coming through and a camera's pointing somewhere, we got a live stream. And like, that's where, like, oh, that hurts my heart. Like, the problem here is, yes, you're giving them access to the message, but you're making the church look really dumb, and you're making it so they can't focus. Right? Like, they are not focusing on God. The whole time they're focusing on what is wrong with this church. Like, how could they possibly be doing this? And it's awesome the church is trying to do something. But if you've got a team that's focused on this, like, what we talked about in the previous question. Their goal is not to like figure out who's watching and should they be watching. Their goal is just to like iterate on this thing and make it excellent. And that's something I love about this is I now have the opportunity to come in here and think through it from the perspective, the product perspective that I have God has put into me, or I guess I see things slightly differently, as all three of us do, of being able to think through, okay, how could this be better? Why does this church do it this way? And would I see all of these large churches do it this way? Why do I enjoy it more when I see it that way? Why am I not distracted by it, but I'm able to engage with it more when it's that way versus this way and this shot and this why? Like, for instance, a shot waist up versus a shot that's the full stage. Why is it different to me? Like, right, and it takes you back, and that's really the product perspective of, oh, I guess I have more distractions here. I guess it changes the perspective. It makes it feel like I'm not there anymore, right? Like that big shot makes it feel that way versus the close-in shot. It feels a lot more personal, and I'm actually able to engage more. And those are the types of things we're thinking through. But you really have to have someone who understands that and actually thinks through it, because I work with a team and these are people that love God. They're volunteering. They want to do this, but as you talk to them, you realize they don't see it that way. They're like, the shot's pointing at the person. Like, why are you talking to me right now? And like, that's where it's really important to make sure you got the right people in the right position. The person running your live stream, if you are fortunate enough to have a live stream team, the person running that team, or I hope you have someone running that team, they need to have someone that just understands and has a passion for it, but also not a narcissist, to make sure they're not making the whole team quit, but make sure there's someone that loves the people that are on their team and they have a passion for it and can see that sort of thing. And then from that, once you have that, just make sure you're actually utilizing it. Don't just post it to YouTube and not let anybody know. Like that's one of the biggest problems is a church will get it figured out, or maybe they don't even have it figured out, but then just post to YouTube and like there's no way that anybody even knows it's there unless they're subscribed to the channel. Like get that on Facebook, get that on wherever so people are made aware of it. And that way all of the work this team is doing is made available. Now we're going down a slippery slope here where I'm starting to go into Dan territory where it's like, well, aren't you getting all the people that shouldn't be watching it? I will, yes, but also what if the people in that area aren't going to church? You can reach them and then the pastor is starting to message them the right way. So there is a slippery slope, but if everything is in alignment, that slippery slope doesn't need to be there, and it can actually be a tool for ministry. So, that was long, passionate talk, but I'll hand it off to y'all.
No. I love that.
Yeah.
John, something I've realized about working with you is just passion is something you just exude, like, right? Just passion coming out of every pore. Something that I think about, and this is, you guys can push back on this and say you're wrong, Dan. I think the church often looks at new technology and they try to mimic old things or old behaviors. So let me kind of talk a little bit about this and see if we can unpack it together. You cannot get an in-service experience in a live stream, okay? And so at churches, when I've been watching churches, they really want to try to recreate. To Kasey's point, hey, let's go ahead and stand. And you're like, I'm in my living room in my pajamas. I'm like, okay, like I'm just here. And like my kid got their Fruit Loops. Like, what's Dad doing? It just doesn't work that way. And I think with churches, what I'd love to see is churches say, okay, this is a new medium. How is this being experienced beyond our walls? Because live streaming is actually used a lot. And so I would say, honestly, most church live streams, you need to go watch Twitch, right? We're talking about some of the most engaging live streams ever. It's not just because it's video games. It's really not. I think what happens is we look at a live stream and it seems a lot like just a recording, a really high quality recording. And people are going to, and that's great. That's awesome. If that's what you want it to be. If you want it to be something where someone's going to sit and engage, you have to make it engaging, and it's not going to feel like you're an in-person service. And so if you're going to make, and again, you say, well, Dan, that's not the point. I'm just trying to allow them to hear the message and do this. Okay, awesome. But if you're going to try to make this a tool to reach the lost or a tool to reach people in your community, then you might want to look at how do people interact with live streams. So again, Twitch, right? There are different places. You're like, damn, what are you talking about? You're like talking about exploding GIFs and like chat, right? Or what are we going at? Those are engaging live streams. And I think the way that a church typically shows a live stream, and again, I'm just trying to get us outside that normal paradigm of it's great. I mean, whether you call it a live, it's great that's a live stream. It's showing during the live time, but I would love to see a church who really tries to embrace the medium of what live stream is. Like live streams are very present in our culture today, right? From YouTube to Twitch. Well, look at how people are engaging with those live streams, and then bring over like some of those methods into your church's live stream. Again, you're like, it'd be really weird if someone stood up while your pastor was talking and took away some of the attention. But people don't have the attention span of sitting there for 30 to 45 minutes, just right, watching a single talking head. It's not it's a really tough thing to do in a video. I love hearing preaching. I can listen to that for 30 to 45 minutes, but to be staring at a screen, it's actually difficult to watch a sermon on a screen. I mean, if you're like, heretic, Dan's a heretic. No. I mean, I listen to sermons quite a bit, but to like sit there and watch, and you can change camera angles and do all that. Well, how do Twitch users and Twitch users keep engagement? They kind of break it up. They try to get you to engage with it. Where in a normal service, it wouldn't be the same. So I would say a couple things. One, definitely use people in the comments to try to engage with people and try to start conversations. Ask for engagement during the service. Don't feel bad breaking away from the preaching for a second, right? You kind of have the pastor's notes and having a chance to say, hey, right, what are your thoughts on this? Or what do you think? Throw it in the chat. And using what we'd see in a normal streaming environment. How do we keep people's attention, right? Can we do that in the preaching as well? So now I've taken John's approach, like how can you do stream? But if you're going to do it, right, if you're going to do streaming, you might as well do it really well, which means it needs to be engaging. There should be a difference between your recorded service and your live stream. That's all I'm saying. There should be a difference between that. Right now, churches, basically their recording and their live stream are the exact same thing.
That is such a great point, Dan, of exactly what you just said, not to just resave everything, but the live stream should be unique and that it's engaging in a different way, a unique way to the people that are engaging in that capacity. And I love some of those practical elements that you gave of whether it's checking out Twitch, but also comment sections or chats. Like I know, again, during COVID, just that ability to kind of have a staff member, a pastor in the chat, engaging with people, prayer requests, questions about the sermon, like live questions of, hey, they just went through this verse. I've got a question about that. And then to be able to dialogue in a chat is something that you wouldn't really be able to do on a Sunday morning. They're not going to stand up and raise your hand and be like, excuse me, pastor, what do you mean by that? But a chat allows that to happen. And maybe kind of like an unplanned twist here, but I love it. We got into some of the more kind of practical implementation when it comes to live stream. Dan, you kind of mentioned some examples of things to do, things to focus on. John, you did as well, of kind of camera angles, wide angle versus the waist up, things of that sort. But John, would you have any other, even, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but even like one or two more like practical things if you're speaking to the church that either doesn't do live stream or they just got the camcorder in the back and it's a wide angle and there's audio and there's video and they're done, what would be a practical next step for them to kind of take that next level so it is that unique live stream experience?
Yeah, and I mean, it takes, every step you take takes a lot. Right. So I say, we talk about this one shot, going to multiple shots, going to like probably 2 stationary cameras and a man camera. Like every one of those steps is a huge step for a church. So I completely agree with Dan's approach of being able to have like even like calls to action, a QR code in the corner of something you can interact with. I think that sort of thing's great, but then it's a matter of how are you splitting that even from a stream further, where you're now controlling, like my church has a stream deck using OBS, and honestly, even going down to the technical level, being a super technical person I still don't even understand what we're doing. So like, you're really going to have to go deep down that hole. But I do think like there's all different ways you can handle it. It's really up to what I would encourage is it all comes down to making sure what you're doing for engagement isn't pulling the person out of the message. I think that's the most important thing. So I think versus saying this is what you should do, I would say just be cautious, right? Like I think making sure that it's as clear of like the shots, everything's honing in on what you want people to know. So if the pastor speaking, make sure it's the waist up. Even if the band's playing, make sure you got shots that are, I love I'm a musical person too. So even like we didn't even talk about the worship element. Like we could do a whole podcast about that. I love even the element. I tell my wife, I feel like I get to be part of the band, which I used to get to be, because I can switch shots on the beats. And I think like even that element of it's like helping that, like it makes even worship feel more like you're there, because there's an element of being there in worship where you're like in the room with everyone worshiping, but I can still give someone an element where this whole thing is orchestrated and it's thought through and it's working the way it's supposed to be working. And I think just the intentionality about making sure you're doing the thing to create something to as much perfection as possible without distracting the person watching is probably the number one element that I would go for. And I know that didn't directly answer your question. It's kind of an open-ended question of you could do anything, but just make sure that everything you do doesn't distract the person watching. And I think that's my number one thing. Like an example. In the live stream team we have right now, something that some of the members of the team do is they like to fade the shots, and they'll like half fade the shots. So you'll have slides we show, and then they'll fade it, and then they'll fade back halfway to create this element where like the shot's showing but the pastor's showing. Every time I see it, I completely stop focusing, and I'm like, what is happening? Is something broken? And I understand what they're trying to do is give you both, but like no, let people focus on the thing. And I think that's it. Just making sure everything you're doing, don't try to be too creative with anything. Try to just make sure everyone's able to focus. Now, that doesn't mean don't let them engage. Church is about engaging, and they're not going to be able to engage. So this sounds like I'm contradicting Dan. I am not contradicting Dan, but make sure those messages are things where the things people are engaging which I was thinking Twitch instead with are things that you can like that are keeping them in the message. And also make sure it's not something that takes them on a 10-minute tangent. Definitely don't push them out to the internet. But yeah, that gives a lot of thoughts.
That's good. Yeah.
Go take this quiz. Which Disney princess are you like? Come on back.
Man, I've loved this conversation. And as we say at the beginning of every episode, we talk through all things churches and product. This has been entirely church focused, which has been absolutely awesome and hopefully provides you, the listener, the watcher, tons of value when you're evaluating your own personal church's live stream kind of capacity and vision and direction around that. But Dan, I wanted to give you just like a quick minute as we wrap up here of maybe just talking through on the product side, looking at church apps, Tithely sites, and obviously, John, you can jump in as well here, but when we talk about some of our Tithely products, what are some of the tools that churches can use when it comes to online church, live stream, etc.?
Right. Well, let me just highlight church apps. I'm so proud of the work that's been done there. We recently launched live streaming. We actually have a pretty opinionated view of live streaming here. We want it to go to YouTube. We actually think more preaching that's in the marketplace, and YouTube is our marketplace. So we don't try to like hide it behind our own, live streaming service or platform. We actually want it to go to YouTube. And so we take that streaming link though, and we can pull it into the app. And what's wonderful about that, there's a couple things. One, it's really easy to chat with other church members within the app. And then two, you can also set out some push notifications. Say, hey, our church is going live. You want to jump on in. And so, and again, it's so easy. It's beautiful. People can open up their church app right then and there. They can watch the service. They can chat with other people, and it's just wonderful. So I would say if you haven't picked up or started using the church app, and I know this, we have tens of thousands of churches we get to serve. Most of them haven't used the app, and I don't know if they're maybe intimidated by that, or maybe they got some bad advice that churches don't need to use apps. I actually don't agree with that. I think an app, it's pretty simple to set up. It's not going to take you a lot of time, and it can really be a tool to help you connect to your church members on a regular basis. And if they happen to be out of town or they happen not to be able to come to church, it's great to send them a little push notification, say, hey, our church is going live. Click here, and they can jump in and begin chatting with some other people at the church and watch the service live. And so just some phenomenal work there by our apps team.
So true. John, anything you'd want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, just going into the app side, something I love about what we've been able to do, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved with the apps product that was, as it was brought into Tithely, I was involved with that team even before we were part of Tithely. And it's always been, like, a focus has been open. Like, everything is open, where you can use whatever service you want. This is for also audio sermons, sermon series. Like, there's things we do that nobody else does because we started with the focus being one thing we want to do is allow you to do this however you want to do it. And that means YouTube, Vimeo, bring an HLS link. So you don't have to use YouTube. You could use an HLS link from any source. You can do anything and we'll bring it into it however we can. And that, I think that really helps simplify it for churches, where you can post multiple places. You can post to one place. You can not even post to the Vimeos and the YouTubes, but we'll do everything we can on our end to make it work for you. And that's something I love about working at Tithely, is that our approach is to help the church. Like, we want it to work for you. And I know I'm going down the line of just saying how much I love Tithely, which I don't want to go too far down that, but I do love that. Like, that's always been my heart, and I was able to come into Tithely with that heart and keep pushing that way, and nobody ever pushed back even a tiny bit. And so it was really cool getting to build out the live stream platform that we have in a way where we're not trying to lock you into something. We're saying, no, come as you are, and let us help you reach the people you want to reach. So I don't know if I really answered the question that well for you there, Kasey, but like, that is a deep passion of mine. It's really cool to see it still going as strong as it is the way it is within Tithely.
So cool. Yeah, I have absolutely loved this conversation. At Tithely, as part of the Tithely team, we have the benefit of really liking who we work with. But I was really coming into this this time, I was expecting it to be a bit more like rock'em sock'em, like I'm on this side of the fence, Dan's on this side, John's on this side, like, see how it's going to go.
Oh, man.
Yet as soon as we
just switch sides. By the time I'm talking about Twitch and your live streams ought to look more like Twitch, John's like, hold up. Now I gotta. I just wanted to confuse everybody. That was my goal. Like, where's Dan now? Well, if you came in the middle of the podcast,
keeping us on our toes. But yeah, it was really cool to see where maybe there was this perceived like difference of opinion, yet by just talking it through, even just amongst the three of us, like, oh, look at all this overlap, look at all this agreements, which was really cool to see. And so again, as we film these podcasts, the hope is that we're providing you, the church, value when you tune in, when you listen, when you watch, when it comes to all things churches and all things product. So we'd encourage you to continue to engage with us as we get more and more episodes out to you, the church. And once again, thank you for joining us on Tithely Backstage.